when he was about 3 years old, I had been able to feed him orally up until that point, and I was very prideful about that. But you know, it became apparent that you probably no longer feed a 3-year-old with a bottle. You know, like it just was like, how long can I do this? He couldn't drink from a cup. He couldn't sit up. He had no head control. You know, those are all things you need to eat. And so aspiration was becoming an issue. Swallowing was becoming an issue. And then we were presented with the feeding tube. And then I really fought that one very hard, which I think a lot of, I don't know if it's more of a motherly thing. I mean, that's your primal instinct to feed your child. And I thought, no way, you're not going to do that. That's not how this is going to work. But it became apparent that we had to do this. And he needed more and more medications. And even just for the ease of delivering those medications, I agreed to it. And yes, in hindsight, that was the best thing I ever did. But I was very prideful about, I did not want that for him. I could feed him, he was gonna gain weight, but I was losing that battle. So that was the first kind of intervention. And then it was years later where as he grew, his hips were becoming an issue with dislocating. You know, he never walked, he never bear any weight on his legs. So those are all things that you need to keep your hips in their sockets, and his were not staying, and his muscle tone played a big part in that. So that was a very agonizing decision. That was lots of sleepless nights and you know, consultations with orthopedic surgery, and you know, Josh and I talking about it. And I think there's a lot of guilt with, what if you don't do it? What if you just wait and see if this is going to get worse? And I can remember being in a orthopedic surgery appointment, and I had done these several times, and we had looked at the x-rays several times, and it was sort of coming to the point where I needed to decide what to do, and within a few months we would have to decide this. And I think the doctor looked at me and he realized I was agonizing over this, and he just said, "You're not a bad mother if you decide not to do this." And I didn't know that that's what I needed to hear, but that's exactly what I needed to hear, because I really was worried about what would people think if we chose not to intervene. You know, your child has pain. Of course, you're going to intervene and fix that and help him. But in Sam's case, he would never walk. So it wasn't like doing the surgery would give us that hope of him walking or weight bearing. It was never going to happen. It would be strictly from a pain standpoint to relieve that for him. And so we did decide to sort of wait and see. The hips dislocated and the pain went away. And it never was an issue anymore after that. And they told us that could happen as well. So we were fortunate where that decision just sort of was made for us, where the pain didn't get worse. Now, when you say you want him comfortable, maybe that would have meant we did have to do the surgery to make him comfortable and to put him through the risk of the surgery. But we were fortunate on that one where we didn't have to do that. So spinal fusion was another difficult decision. They're all agonizing. Those are huge surgeries. Those are not, 1-hour surgeries. And I didn't know if Sam would survive the surgery. And then the aftercare, to be honest, I thought, I don't know if I'm gonna survive it. Sam was an irritable kid to begin with, just, and it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how this is gonna work, So we did not do spinal fusion. In the last several years, sort of an issue that I would say blindsided me. I didn't anticipate this being something that would really be so prevalent in Sam's life, was his breathing issues. And that really took me off guard. His anatomy started to change in such a way that his palate was becoming narrower, his airway was narrowing. So anytime there was any little bit of swelling, from a simple cold or respiratory illness. His apnea became very severe. It was incredibly challenging. It was very hard to watch. So we, consulted and talked about a trach and what that would mean and what all of that would mean for us in our home, and more machines and more learning curve and all of that. And that may have been the most agonizing decision of all. And we decided not to. And it was a ton of thought and a ton of appointments and lots of professionals giving us their opinions. And it was like we tried to make the best educated decision we could about that. And that's just what we chose. That was our decision to not do that. It's not for everybody, but that's what we chose. We were very fortunate to have a wonderful social worker. I bounced everything off of her. Every little thing that would change, I bounced it off of her, usually first. And then she would say, okay, I think you need to call this person or that person. And then, having all the specialists, and you have to go to the right one to ask the right questions. And so we did that. We have our support system. We have a wonderful family. I talk to my mom a lot, my sister, just people that I felt comfortable sharing this really kind of private information with and making these really hard decisions. So we tried to use everybody in our circle to make the best educated decisions we could. And I feel like that was the thoughtful thing to do. And it sort of settled us saying, okay, we touched all the bases, we talked to everybody, and this is the consensus. So
what role did Sam's primary care, what did his pediatrician?
So we had several over the course of his life. Do you want me to start from the beginning with that pediatrician, or the one that we ended up with in the end?
Well, why did you have so many pediatricians?
Well, they would leave. They moved on to other hospitals or clinics.
Okay.
A few times I had, one in particular really did not share our vision for Sam. And he made that very apparent. And it was a little hurtful, but I also, in hindsight, thought, I just think he doesn't understand the bigger picture. And I will say that we did have pediatricians throughout most of his life. In the last few years, we switched to a primary care provider, which was a family doctor instead. And I didn't really do that on purpose. We ended up liking this other clinic better and we switched. But I can see now how important it was to maybe have a family doctor, because pediatricians deal with colds and flus and things like that in kids, and not always chronically ill children. So it was hard for them to see outside of that box sometimes. And so having a family doctor who deals with elderly and children and all age groups, they knew what an end of life situation would look like or could look like. They could advise us a little differently and support us in a different way. So I'm really glad we made that decision. But I did work tirelessly over the years to find the right ones who supported us.